It's Waxing Lyrical BABY.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Duds. I'm your host, Mains, my colleague in a danger zone in Rainford, to Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
City and Spurs playing five-a-side.
I'm going to be brutally honest with you. I don't care how that game is going, as the Manchester City Spurs game that I need to give my full attention to doesn't happen until Saturday. Much more focused on Liverpool versus Porto, which is on right now. All in for VAR. VAR's the best until it screws me over eventually at a later date.
Which it will.
Yeah, of course. For those who are new to the show, I think we've got a few new listeners. Welcome. We always say that every show. We're glad to have you here. I'm Mains, colleague Dutton. Scousers chatting nonsense. This week, chatting Weird World, two absolutely classic stories. One will link to one of mine and Neil's favourite films of all time. Also, we're going to look at Daniel Jeremiah's NFL.com mock draft because it has a few interesting things for me and Neil to discuss. And then Neil, friend of the show, quote unquote lifelong 49ers fan, and part of the former Stronghold, and now Yahoo rep with our mate Liz Loser is Mr. Matt Harmon.
Indeed, another person who we didn't actually speak to last year, which surprised me.
For those who don't know Matt, he is the inventor of reception perception, and if you want to know whether a wide receiver is good or not, he is the man to go to.
Indeed he is. Despite his own claims that the only route he could run would be a screen before he would be obliterated within seconds of catching the ball.
Well, he's better than me because I'd probably crocodile arm it, just fall short. Full Randy Moss. I'd be full Randy Moss on a screen. Like.
Yeah, it'd be incredible how many passes could just be out of my reach.
There would be business decisions all over the place, Neil, in relation to me running a screen. Neil, let's get on with the show. Weird World time, and we all love a random college thing that no one can really explain. And here's one for you.
Me getting a degree is one of them.
Well, yeah. Mississippi has a mashed potato theory. One neighborhood in Jackson, Mississippi has a particularly delicious mystery on its hands. Someone is leaving bowls of mashed potatoes all over the place. CBS News reports the Bellhaven neighborhood has become aware of a presence of a benevolent and/or prank-loving resident who has chosen to spend their time swooping in to deposit bowls of the world's most perfect food on porches. That is, just so you know, that's editorialization there. I prefer chips. In mailboxes atop cars and so forth. This neighborhood does a lot of quirky things, resident Jordan Lewis told CBS. We decorate road signs, we put Christmas trees in our potholes, so it's not surprising at all. Okay.
Characters, eh?
But it's definitely one of the weirdest things I've seen since living in Jackson. First of all, how do you have your mashed potatoes, Neil?
Soaked in gravy.
Correct, and that's why I come to this as Neil will know. Some won't. Obviously, the accent says that I'm from Liverpool. I do not live in Liverpool anymore. I live in East Anglia, Great Yarmouth, in fact, the middle of effing nowhere. And I found out that gravy is a northern phenomenon. And Kate had sausage and mash one of the first times we were together, and tried to give me beans. And I was like, "What am I supposed to do with this? It's mash. Where's me gravy?"
Yeah, I have had mash. Especially on occasion, I've had it where it's been that creamy that I didn't need gravy. It is very rare. And it is only in certain parts of the world. There is a pub/restaurant up in the Lake District that said it was the creamiest mashed potato I've ever had in my life. However, that is the exception. It is not the norm. If you give me any form of potato and it's not in some type of sauce, I will give it you back.
Yeah, the only kind of exception I would say is a jack of potato is allowed cheese and beans.
It's allowed cheese.
Beans
are
sauce, is it?
Beans are a no-no for me.
You're not a bean man, though, are you?
No, I find the texture rather unpleasant, and I just don't see the appeal. And plus, I've got enough gas for everyone.
Yeah, that is very true, Neil. That is very true. Now, me and Neil became friends around 2001. Around that time, we started in the cinema together, Odeon Cinemas, Switch Island. Other cinemas are available and better.
That was November 2001.
That was November 2001. At that time, we started watching a lot of films that were on at the cinema at the time. Such hits in. Oh no, when you started, what came on when you started, Neil? I was thinking when I started in '99. What films were big in 2001?
Well, I started for Potter.
You started with Potter. There you go.
But
Potter.
obviously, the month after Potter was the first Lord of the Rings as well.
Yeah, it was Potter for people who are English. That is Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. For people who are American, that's Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And if you've called it anything else, you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
One of the set of films we started to watch was a group called the Jay and Silent Bob Collection. You will know it from such things as Dogma and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. There's a classic one, Neil, our favourite, Chasing Amy, which is stars Ben Affleck and Jason Lee as they both try and fall in love with a lesbian girl, hence the name Amy. They go to visit Amy in New York City, and Jason Lee brings a big bag, Neil. Why does he bring a big bag?
Stroke books.
Stroke books, for those who are uneducated in the world of porn, is what Jason Lee described as his porn mags. Don't forget this film is probably early 90s, that's why he's gone for that. I don't know if we'll give the Jason Lee line now.
Let's not.
Let's not, but check that film out, it's fantastic.
One of the weirdest last acts of any film I've ever seen in my life.
Yes, but Dutton, it seems that, stroke books may have gone, and I assume DVDs had as well, but that's not true. A US man is suing his parents after they destroyed his massive pornography collection, which he claims was worth £29,000.
What you spend on it doesn't make it worth that, mate.
Correct. What was I going to say? His parents admit dumping the 12 boxes of films and magazines. 12 boxes of films and magazines. This is sorry. I'm going to say this, so close your ears for the kids. Which includes such titles as Frisky Business and Big Bad Grannies.
Oh
Don't
my
ever.
God.
I may never blink again. It gets better though. The 40-year-old from Indiana moved into their home in Grand Haven, Michigan, in October 2016 after a divorce. Do you think he was divorced because he had too much porn?
A possibility.
That's me. In the court papers, he said when he moved out 10 months later, they delivered his things to his new home in Indiana, but his pornography collection was nowhere to be seen. I like the idea that he's moved into their house, and then he's moved out and made them move all his stuff back, and then is moaning that they binned some of his, I'll be honest, crap. I don't know this guy's name, and I'm not gonna cast aspersions on him. I believe, and I've been told by Neil, that there's the thing called the internet, and on the internet, the same things that he's getting in magazines and videos, he could get on the internet for free. I don't know this. I'm not aware of it. I've just been told by interested third parties.
Yeah, bigger boys came and told me.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I just assumed that Neil would never lie to me.
Yeah, I mean the innocence of finding such muck, in hedges and in other places where it's been abandoned, obviously is an excitement that you can't replicate by typing search terms into the internet. But I digress.
Weird World is one of our favourite off-season parts of the show. If you have any weird stories that you would like to share with the world, please send them to me and Neil. I am at Mainsy7. Neil is at N.13, and together we are at Waxing_Lyrical. Now let's get on to the NFL part of the show, because that's in theory why people listen, although sometimes I think it's not the reason that people listen. But anyway,
I didn't know people were.
Well, I know at least 3 people this week have tweeted us to say they've listened, so and they were 3 people that we didn't know or were related to, so that's a start. Absolutely a move up in the world. So let's look at Daniel. You sent me Daniel Jeremiah's NFL.com mock draft 3.0, I believe, came out on Monday, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something that jumped out to you, I guess, and that was the quarterbacks and where they were positioned and where they went. Let's just get straight into the business end of this thing. In the we spoke to Mark Schofield only, 3 or 4 weeks ago. If you haven't listened to it, go back to him. Mark's excellent on the quarterbacks. And he was not tremendously high on Daniel Jones.
No.
To be honest, he preferred Brett Rippon, who, to be honest, he was in the minority in that, in terms of where you would read in, I guess, in what we call the bigger publications, but Mark was very high on him. Daniel Jeremiah has got Daniel Jones going to the Giants. So you think, oh, okay, he's got Daniel Jones going to the Giants. No, not at 17, at 6.
So, Daniel Jeremiah is, a former scout in the NFL. He worked for the Browns, the Ravens, and the Eagles. He speaks to a lot of people around the league. This is why I put mock draft, as we know. The first word is mock, and people should, for most of them, because we don't know. But he is basically making these decisions on his draft based on things he is hearing. So he is tuned in. We spoke to Charles Davis last year, and he told us, if you're going to do a mock draft for NFL.com, you can't just put the best 32 fits. You have to be a little bit controversial. You got to go a little bit, got to get a hook somewhere. Am I saying he's literally said Daniel Jones to the Giants to get clicks? No. I'm just saying that, if he just said, they'll take, they'll take a quarterback. Oh, who's the next best? Dwayne Haskins. Yeah, that's fine. Then that would be boring. Daniel Jones, as I say, I would be stunned if the Giants take a quarterback in the first round. They have 2 picks, I know, but as we know, they are on a campaign of make Eli great again, mega, and I just think that it would fly in the face of everything they've done to say that they are not rebuilding if they were to take a quarterback this early, because that would imply, well, you are, because this pick cannot help you now.
Yeah.
But I think, if you look at, you should go and say it's Daniel Jeremiah, move the sticks. It's his mock draft 3.0, as I say. It's an interesting first round. Not terribly relevant for a fantasy point of view. I say there are the quarterbacks have been taken. Kyler Murray goes number 1 to the Cardinals. Daniel Jones goes number 6 to the Giants. Dwayne Haskins goes number 11 to the Bengals, which I think was interesting. The most controversial one, and obviously it's a slight it's a slight history repeating itself, is the 4th quarterback being taken in the first round is Drew Lock, which might be controversial depending on your own point of view. The controversy stems from who drafts Drew Lock, and that is the Green Bay Packers. Now, obviously, they gave Aaron Rodgers a big contract last year. They weren't very good last year, so it's a pick that isn't going to help them. Yeah. In 2005, they took Aaron Rodgers into the 25th pick when they had a quarterback who hadn't missed a game since, I think, the first year of the Lombardi era at Green Bay. So if they stick to their board and their best player is Drew Lock, then, who knows, they could do it. And I say, from a fantasy point of view, it's not terribly interesting. There's no running backs going in the first round. I think that's fair. From what I've seen and heard, this is not a rich, talented group of running backs. There's only one wide receiver taken.
Neil,
that's Marquise Brown.
Stop, and let's stop, because let's be honest, this is 75% an Eagles show. Can we call him by his real name?
Hollywood?
Let's call him Hollywood Brown. Let's call him Hollywood Brown. Let's call him the Eagles pick. I was listening to First Draft with Todd McShay, and Todd McShay said the comp for Hollywood Brown in terms of talent, in terms of speed, in terms of overall athleticism, is a small chap we like to call Deshaun Jackson.
So this essentially what the Eagles are doing after trading for Deshaun Jackson is they are bringing the Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man meme to life.
Correct.
The only other area, say, for have any real fantasy relevance is the fact that there are tight ends going off the ball in the first round, and they're no surprise they are the 2 Iowa tight ends. The first one is T.J. Hawkinson. Daniel Jeremiah has him going to the Bills at 9, which would be interesting. In his words, Hawkinson would quickly emerge as the best friend of Josh Allen and LaShawn McCoy. He helps in both the passing and the running games. And then later on at pick 24, which I think is the Raiders' 20th selection in this draft, he has Noah Fant. Fant would be an upgrade over Jared Cook, the tight end they just lost in free agency. So it's a talented draft. I mean, I don't know what you think about who he has going to Washington.
Burns, he's talented. He's a talented linebacker who can cover. He's an interesting player. I like the idea. I'm not a massive fan of linebacker in the first round, but I think it's a logical one because it's a coverage linebacker. It's that, so it makes sense in that kind of situation.
He does label him as edge.
Yeah,
So I don't know whether he's more outside linebacker.
Yeah, I guess. I'm not too sure.
There are quite a few edge defenders, to be honest, that have gone.
Yeah, I think so, and I think I have to say, like the defensive side of the ball is not something that I'm very au fait with in college. I'm we're okay on, in the UK, unless you do a lot of study, which I don't. I know you do a lot more than me. It's difficult to know a lot of these players because you only get to see 3 games a week, if that.
Yeah.
If you stay, if you're staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever, so it's not easy. But I always find it interesting in these kinds of situations when someone of Daniel's notoriety does something along the lines of Jones to the Giants. So, I know that Kuiper loves Daniel Jones. He doesn't love him at 6, but he still loves him. What I find interesting is that for whatever reason, there's always one of the quarterbacks whose stock falls every year. Last year it was Josh Rosen. For whatever reason, it went from he's number 2, and then he somehow goes to 11, and that seems to be Haskins this year. And I wonder if that is hurting Arizona. And what I mean by that is I think it's obvious that the Giants and the Redskins need a quarterback, and I think both teams will be happy with Josh Rosen. However, I think they'd be happier with Dwayne Haskins. And if Haskins in this draft is getting to 11, then can you get from 15 or 17 to 10? Easier, yes. So will that cost the same price as Rosen will cost is a question. I don't know. And that may be something that those two franchises are looking at.
Two of the best names in the first round are both cornerbacks. Greedy Williams was going to the Falcons at 14. And the excellently named Rock Ya-Sin, who's going to the Chargers.
I don't even, yeah. Well, yeah.
I did find it interesting.
But while we're on the Chargers, Neil, before we digress, because I don't want to digress, I just want to congratulate the Los Angeles Chargers for becoming the powder baby blue Los Angeles Chargers full time. Don't pull that face at me. I texted you this last night and you didn't answer, and I knew there was a reason you didn't answer. You're not happy, are you? I can't believe it.
It's not that I'm not happy, it's just I prefer dark blue. I prefer the blue they had this year. But again, you grew up with the powder blue Chargers. I did not.
It's a lovely top. It's a lovely top.
Yeah. What I did find interesting, the last thing I will say about the draft is I looked at another friend of the show, Jenny Vrentas' mock draft, and she has 9 players going to the exact same team as Jeremiah, and it's not the first 9. I mean, she's got Kyler Murray going 1, Nick Bosa going 2, but then she also has where are we? She has Garrett Bradbury going to the Vikings at 18, so to Jeremiah, he's a centre. Cody Ford, offensive tackle, going to the Texans. Noah Fant going to the Raiders. Hollywood Brown going to the Eagles. And Rock Ya-Sin and Byron Murphy, the cornerbacks, going to the Chargers and the Chiefs, as well as Dexter Lawrence going to the Patriots. So I think it's interesting because you like to see she again, senior football writer for the MMQB. She's people talk to Jenny. She knows a lot of people. So I just find it interesting when people who've come from this from differing angles, because bear in mind, they don't work together. I just find it interesting when their opinions coalesce in this way. So
well,
it's interesting.
I think what that would make me think is that the people that Jenny speaks to and the people that Daniel speaks to have a tendency to all cross compare, as in they could be the same people in certain situations.
This is it. You don't know who's talking to them, do you?
Exactly right. I know that, but even if you're talking to them, doesn't mean they're telling you anything. Mel Kiper is best mates with John Dorsey, and John Dorsey tells him Jack. Do you know what I mean? John Dorsey did not tell him that Baker Mayfield was going 1, and he never put Mayfield as 1 last year. Do you know what I
No.
mean? Because that's not his job, right? You can be friends, but you can't give that kind of situation away. Well, Neil, that's the news portion of the show. So let's get on to the interview portion of the show, and let us add the brilliant Matt Harmon to the show to chat us about reception perception and wide receivers in this year's draft. And joining us now on Waxing Lyrical, returning guest, returning friend, Mr. Matt Harmon, football writer and analyst, easy for me to say, for Yahoo Sports, and of course the creator of Reception Perception. How are we, Matt?
I'm doing great, guys. Ready for the NFL draft next week. Ready to be in Nashville. I'm super excited. This draft definitely, I guess it's not as sexy as last year's draft. Maybe even like the year before that, because we don't have. Last year we had all the quarterbacks. The year before that we had so many running backs that I think would impact fantasy football leagues across the spectrum. But this draft is interesting, and I think the exhilarating part about the draft every single year is that we really get to see what teams focus on, what they think of themselves. And I find that to be such super valuable information. So for me, I'm still very, very excited about the draft. And honestly, I'm just really excited because I'm going to be there, and Nashville is a great town. Looking forward to experiencing that for the first time. So I'm happy to be talking to you guys about it all today.
I think this is one of those drafts, just from the build up, as you say, it's not the sexiest draft. This is one of those draft seasons that has been the best advert for, can we not just have the draft in the first week of March, please? No, just get it out of the way.
Yeah, I guess this year has felt a little less exhausting than in previous years. I mean, I think especially the 2017 draft to me was one that was just like, okay, let's get here, because we knew about the running backs. There were certain players who just had really dumb narratives around them. Even last year, like the Josh Rosen narrative was like, I'm done hearing about, which teams think he's like a weird guy or don't like him because of this, that, and the other. So this year, at least, like, I'm ready to find out if the Kyler Murray thing is really going to happen. The more that people start to deny it, the more that I think it probably is going to be the what goes down. So there's a lot of answers that I'm looking forward to in the draft. And I think there's a lot of wild cards, too, in terms of teams that could really shake it up. I mean, the Raiders, especially with 3 first-round picks, could really get wild. So, I mean, yeah, I'm ready. I am ready for it to just happen.
My sister has actually just flown out to Nashville for a wedding today. And when she said she was going to Nashville, I said, "Are you going for the draft?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Oh, this is why we, didn't speak between the ages of 11 and 18." So, Matt, you can say that it's because it's Nashville and because it's the draft, but I know there's no Mannerings in the NFL, and the last Dutton was back in the 1980s. There is a Duron Harmon with the Patriots, but now there is a player at your position with your name, and this is why you're excited. Do you have big hopes for Mr. Kelvin Harmon?
Yeah, it's exciting because I remember during the middle of the season, before I had even really started evaluating him, I knew a couple of years ago that there was a player named Kelvin Harmon that was coming out. So, of course, when I posted on Twitter, like, love this player because, I mean, he's got a great name. Everybody's like, oh, yeah, Kelvin, great wide receiver name. We've had a lot of history with that. So I set myself up for that joke. But, yes, very excited for my cousin Kelvin Harmon that he will be in the NFL draft. I mean, honestly, though, he's an interesting player because he kind of fits into the grand view thoughts of the wide receiver position this year, which is big wide receivers are back. Like, we're seeing a lot of players that have size, that have physicality at the position, where we really haven't seen that the last 3 years. It's been more about these quick separation players and more towards where the league is going. So I think we are going to see sort of a revert back to that. We'll see how the NFL evaluates these guys. Kelvin Harmon, I actually compared him to the Quinoa of this wide receiver class in my write-up of him, which I know for all the people that love my health food takes, they'll really get in on that one. Like, to me, it makes sense because no one eats quinoa because it's like those of us that do. No one eats it because it's like, oh, this is great. This is the tastiest food. I'm real jazzed up to be eating this. No, you eat it because while it's not flashy, It's good for you. It's necessary. It brings nutritional value. And I think that's what Kelvin Harmon is as a wide receiver. Like, there is nothing flashy about his game outside of a few really nice contested catches. But I do think he releases well off the line of scrimmage. I think he is a player that obviously can win the ball in the air. And I think there's a place for that as an X-receiver in a complementary role. I don't think he's ever going to be a big-time fantasy star. But, on an offense like the Giants that has a flanker slot hybrid, a pair of them in Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard, I could really see Kelvin Harmon fitting in as a solid X receiver there.
Let's play a game before we move on, Matt. Neil, what's quinoa? And not something that you've read in Matt's articles. That doesn't count.
It's I don't eat it. This is like, whenever you and Marcus or Patrick Doherty start talking baseball players, I'm aware of what you're speaking of, but I haven't got a frigging clue what the hell it is.
Exactly.
Matt, just going, we will focus mostly on the drafted players this year, but just going back to another player who has been a favourite of yours in the past, and an awful lot is being written about him. There's a lot of people have high hopes for them. Is this, as the kids say, Chris Godwin's season?
Yes, I think the kids are right to say that. Look,
Matt,
he's a player.
Matt, quickly before you go on, like I just want to let everybody in on the thing that Neil Dutton, one of the oldest 38-year-old men on the planet, sent a rundown of questions and actually wrote his question was, Dutch will say Chris Godwin, capital S, capital Z, capital N. Like, he actually knows what that means. Sorry, Matt, carry on.
I love it. Look, Neil's trying to fit in with the kids. We're all trying to relate to a younger audience. We hear that every day at a big media company like Yahoo Sports. So listen, I think the kids are right here, as I said. And Chris Godwin is a player who, coming out of the NFL draft a couple of years ago, I thought he was a top 5 wide receiver prospect that year, the 2017 class. I thought he was every bit as good of a player like Mike Williams, for example, who went in the top 10 that year. Obviously, Chris Godwin went in the 3rd round. He had a clear trump card trait in his ability to win contested passes, but I thought in reception perception, he showed really well as a player who could also create and sustain separation and win with his route running. And that, to me, has been key even in the NFL. I mean, I don't think people realize that this is a player, again, that has been playing well all throughout. I mean, he's an obvious breakout candidate. For example, I went back and looked at his reception perception results from last year at the NFL level. And I was surprised with even how good he was then. He had a 73% success rate versus man coverage, 87th percentile, and still continued that great contested catch dominance with an 81% conversion rate on contested passes. I mean, this is a player who can do it all. I think he will slot into a high volume role in this Buccaneers offense that, of course, gets a nice boost in stock with Bruce Arians there. So, I mean, yeah, it's Chris Godwin season. You don't have to reach too hard for your big wide receiver breakout this year. I promise. I'll look for more. But Chris Godwin is the number one example.
See, I actually used the Godwin and the fact that Bruce Arians loves the vertical passing game, especially with the wide receivers. I wrote something for Numberfire this past week about O.J. Howard, about how I think people may be slightly too high on Howard because Bruce Arians has said in the past, the tight ends are here to block. He's got Mike Evans, he's got Chris Godwin, and while I love O.J. Howard, I just think just because Bruce Arians has never had a tight end like this before, that doesn't automatically make it that he's going to know how to use them, whereas he knows how to use his wide receivers.
Yeah, and let's take another step further. I think that we could see the Bucs invest in a speed wide receiver in this draft. Think about maybe an Andy Isabella, a guy that people definitely think can function out of the slot, but I also think if you can get him a free release, I think he could be a vertical threat in the NFL. That could be someone, Bruce Arians, we've seen him over and over again. Think about another receiver, John Brown, a reception perception player that I really like. I think we could see him go for one of those type of players again this year. And that's going to just add another mouth to feed here, because as good as Mike Evans and Godwin are as downfield threats, I don't think that they're necessarily take the top off the defense speed receiver type, because Bruce Arians still wanted to convince Deshaun Jackson to come back It just obviously wasn't going to work from a financial perspective. So there's clearly an interest there, and I think the Bucs might not be done adding more weapons in this year's draft.
If we move on to this year's draft, at the top we're in a lot of noise about N'Keal Harry, Metcalf, Hakeem Butler. They seem to be the big three. A couple of others maybe, Hollywood Brown, but I know Neil wants to talk about them separately because he's got a bit of Eagles love for him. One name that we hear little bits about and some people love and some people are sleeping on is Miles Boykin. What do you think?
Yeah, I love Miles Boykin. I think you can make a case that Boykin's film from his last college season is better than any other player in this year's draft. I mean, what I love about him is that he has the release moves. He can create separation as a big wide receiver. You know, we're talking about N'Keal Harry. We're talking about Hakeem Butler. We're talking about Kelvin Harmon, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I think all of those players to some degree have route running issues. I mean, even DK Metcalf have some questions about their route running ability, their ability to create and sustain separation at all areas of the field. Miles Boykin's the big receiver in this draft that I don't have questions about that with, which is why, to me, I like him better than all of those players I just listed from a big wide receiver perspective. I think Boykin is a really good sleeper, and at the end of the day, even if he doesn't develop like I think he can into a full field route runner as an X receiver, I do think he's going to bring a vertical presence to the game. If there's one player comparison I could make in terms, especially just what he does well, also in conjunction with one area that I think he needs to clean up, is Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay in his rookie season, I think, was an inconsistent player, not just because of the volume of targets that he got, but because I thought he had real issues extending outside of his frame to win contested passes when he didn't earn that separation. But from year one to year two, there was a giant change in that, and that's going to be shown in his reception perception results if people view those in the Ultimate Draft Kit in June when it comes out. I thought Golladay was one of the players that I thought made that huge jump from year one to year two, and I think if Boykin cleans up that flaw as well, because I think he also has that issue, I think we could see him, do something similar, which is become a low-end wide receiver one for an NFL offense.
Matt, on that, I'm interested when people talk about DK Metcalf when they're not talking about the fact he looks like a professional wrestler. Is that he didn't run many routes in college and kind of just said go and run really fast and see what happens? Does that make it difficult to do reception perception on a player like DK Metcalf? And is there a lot of then preposition or assumptions have to be made to get where you go, or just say he hasn't got a number for that, so he scores really low?
Yeah, so I should say off the top, I'm not able to do reception perception on this year's rookie class because I no longer work for NFL Network, therefore no longer have the access to all the college film that I used to chart these guys in previous years. So I'm just out there watching them, trying to get a feel for their route running. But what I have been doing for the articles that I've been writing about these rookie receivers is trying to make reception perception comparisons based on how I see their games and then how they might be best used at the NFL level. And I still think it's a valid concern, the fact that he doesn't run a ton of routes, but the key is this guy is a physical freak, right? As you mentioned. And I think it's up to his NFL coaching staff and the team that drafts him to find the best position for him and how to make him succeed. And I actually used a comparison to Josh Gordon of the 2017 season. Now, look, no one ever wants to say anything nice about Hugh Jackson, and I'm with you. I don't either. But I will say one thing that they did do well was when Gordon came back to the NFL after an almost 3-year absence, they didn't just throw him back out there at X receiver. They moved him around a lot. They used him at the flanker position. They got him to face a lot of zone coverage, and he absolutely crushed that. And he only ran a handful of routes. I think off the top of my head, 60% of his routes run in the 2017 games that I sampled were either a 9, a post, or a slant. I mean, that is exactly what you want to do with DK Metcalf. So I think there is a utilization plan on how to get a highly athletic receiver like him involved in the game without asking him to be more than what he already is, which is a receiver that, as you mentioned, just runs a handful of routes.
See, I think that was something that worried me, and certainly from the reaction that came Metcalf's way after the draft, was that it just seemed as if the spirit of Al Davis had just entered everyone's soul, and there was oh my God, how fast is he? But then when you saw the obviously historically slow, was it the 3-cone when he was slower than Tom Brady? Is that you don't want them just be, well, we've seen quote-unquote speed guys in the last few years do absolutely nothing in the NFL. So obviously the worry is Metcalf, is the fact that he is slightly unpolished. He does have tremendous speed. Is that going to be enough for him to develop, or is he going to be the next flame out, who obviously flamed out but went very quickly doing it?
Well, I think there's definitely a bust factor, no doubt about it. I think a lot of it is going to be based on, again, what is the team that he lands with? Like, if he lands with the team that does want to just throw him out there as their number one receiver, I think there are going to be issues. I think there's going to be growing pains. But if he lands with a team like Green Bay, for example, at the end of the first round, where I've seen him mocked before, perfect fit, because he doesn't have to be the number one receiver. Devontae Adams is that true X guy that also can move around to a lot of different positions. I think that would be an ideal fit for him, because he could line up inside. He could line up as the flanker. They also have several other young receivers that can play multiple positions too. Again, that just allows him to be moved around. That allows him to get some more. He doesn't have to run the full route. He doesn't have to face number one corners. I think that would be a huge win for a player like DK Metcalf to land in a spot like that. And also the second thing to me is just, again, it is the utilization pattern, but also I think there are signs in his film beyond just the speed, beyond just the physical ability. He is very, very aggressive off the line of scrimmage, and can, despite the fact that he might not be the most nuanced technician at releasing from the line and getting off press coverage, he's very violent. He will attack you with his hands, and he can create separation quickly just off that alone. So I think the fact that he knows how to release from press at the line of scrimmage while also being this physical freak, I think that's a bit of a step further ahead of some guys like a Dorial Green-Beckham, a Kevin White. Those guys, they didn't know how to do that at all. I think Metcalf is a little bit farther ahead and is a little bit easier to understand as a prospect than those two were.
Just the name Dorial Green-Beckham. Sorry. Ugh.
Listen. I was on DGB Island, no doubt about it. So I feel you. It's hard. It's hard to remember.
Daniel Jeremiah this week came out with his latest mock draft. Now we spoke. I mentioned earlier in the show actually that we spoke to Charles Davis. It was last year. Yeah, it was last year. He said that when you do these mock drafts, you obviously have to put a little bit in them for people to read them. So I'm not saying that it's all clickbait, but I'm sure if Daniel wants to come on and argue with me, he's more than welcome. He only had one wide receiver going in the first round, and that was Marquise Brown going to the Eagles at 25. As Mainsy points out, some people have compared Marquise Brown to Deshaun Jackson. So do you like the fit, and do you like the player?
Love the player, love the fit. I sent DJ in response to that mock draft the Spider-Man meme of when Deshaun Jackson and Marquise Brown get to training camp, they'll be looking back at each other. Look, let me say this. Marquise Brown, the first thing that people will point to is the fact that he weighed 166 pounds at the combine. Okay, I get it. But I don't know if either of you guys have ever had major surgery that takes you out of, working out for a long amount of time.
I say yes, even though I haven't. That's why I don't work out.
Yeah, right. Sure. Well, I'm not an NFL player. I kind of hate when people do this because it is a little bit annoying. But I'm 6'3", 210 ish on a normal day. When I had a major surgery where I couldn't work out for like 2 months, I dropped down to like 197. That's the lowest I've ever weighed since, becoming like a full-grown adult. It's very possible that Marquise Brown, who is in the middle of a Liz Frank surgery recovery, which is a huge deal, that's something to note in his scouting profile. It's very possible that he usually plays at 170, maybe even 174, something like that, along where Deshaun Jackson plays. He plays at that size, and obviously he comes in the combine after not being able to work out on a busted foot, and he weighs 4 pounds less than he would normally. That's 100% conceivable. So I think that I think it's unrealistic to think that, yeah, he plays at 166 pounds. I just really doubt that that's the case. However, it is something to note. There's no doubt he's a smaller player. Even if he is bigger than he was at the combine, he's a smaller wide receiver. That's for sure. He looks small on the field. However, I think he has the best film of any receiver in this draft class. While Miles Boykin might have the best of the big receivers, I think Hollywood Brown overall, not only is he insanely explosive. He can make people miss in the open field. He's tough too. If you don't get a firm tackle on him, I think he's really hard to bring down. I actually think that's kind of different from Deshaun Jackson in that way. But he's also, much like Deshaun Jackson, underrated as a route runner. I mean, he's a guy who does have some technical nuances to his game. So I think that there's a lot to love with Marquise Brown. DJ has been pretty consistent for the last couple weeks or so that if only one wide receiver goes in the first round, it's going to be Marquise Brown. I think that shows how sold people are on him, how at least a few teams. I think the Chiefs are one that's going to look at him. I think that the Eagles are certainly one that, like, they have Deshaun Jackson back, but is Deshaun Jackson more than just a 1-2 years top rental? No, I don't think so. I think that that's about it. And if they can throw Marquise Brown as a successor into that role, perfect. And oh, by the way, they need vertical speed regardless. You know, last year they were counting on Mike Wallace, and when Mike Wallace went down, it was like that was it. We were out of vertical explosion in the offense. So I think that it's a great pick for the Eagles, who do have a lot of room to maximize more vertical explosion on their offense.
Oh, see, preaching to the choir, Matt, because a number of times last year I was bemoaning the absence of Torrey Smith. You know, I didn't expect to ever be in that position watching the Eagles.
It's not a good position. It's not a good position to be in.
I, for one, am really, really happy that the Eagles are going to get another talented player to add to their roster. I am made up. Woo-hoo. Calling me really happy.
You're a Washington fan, right?
Exactly. So I'm just Neil's already got he's got inside contacts in the Eagles organization. He won't say who they are. But he's telling me that week 1 we're getting battered by Philadelphia, so I look forward to that happening.
Just remember, before Sky invented English football, your teams were great.
My team.
That's all you need to cling on to, mate.
Screw you, Rupert Murdoch. Just in life. Is there any wide receivers we haven't named in this year's draft, Matt, who you think people need to keep an eye on and would be players that you think would make fantastic NFL players in the future?
Yeah, I mean, the appealing part of this year's draft class is that there's so many names. One guy that we haven't brought up, who I think actually might be, we talked about Boykin and Brown as Hollywood Brown as two players that they might be my top wide receivers just in terms of film. I think the safest bet in this year's draft class is A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf's teammate. Everybody talks about DK Metcalf, wasn't even the best wide receiver on his team. It was A.J. Brown, who, like, A.J. Brown does everything really well. Not only is he a big physical slot receiver, you saw him take reps on the outside and release really well from press coverage. I think he can play. I don't know that you're going to ask him to be an X receiver on a down-to-down basis, but I think he could absolutely crush a role like a Juju Smith-Schuster has, who plays a little bit of flanker, then plays inside. I think he's perfect for that. If a team took him at the end of round 1 or the top of round 2, I look at the Indianapolis Colts, right? Like, the Colts love to use T.Y. Hilton as a flanker and use him as an inside receiver as well. Brown could split those reps perfectly with Funchess playing the X receiver position. I think that would add a ton of appeal to a wide receiver core that was basically T.Y. Hilton and nobody else last year. You know, no disrespect to the great Dontrell Inman. But, you know, that's a player that I would love to see there. He's someone that I think is, as I said, the safest wide receiver bet, a clear top 3 wide receiver prospect in this year's draft. Probably, honestly, I think that's my top 3 receivers in this class is Hollywood Brown, Miles Boykin, and A.J. Brown in no order depending on what you need. Now, another guy, too, that I think was worth mentioning is Stanley Morgan Jr. He's a guy from Nebraska, good route runner. I think understands the position, both in timing within his routes and also timing in how to time his jumps, when to get up for contested catches. He's someone that I can absolutely see going in the 4th, 5th round and working his way into a wide receiver rotation. Don't think he's ever going to be a star or anything like that, but he's somebody that in a late round crop of guys that hasn't really stood out. I think he's a player that I've really enjoyed watching. So he's one that I really like. There's a lot of interesting players. Mecole Hardman as well, out of Georgia. I think he's the more interesting future NFL prospect of these Georgia wide receivers because he's explosive, because I think he runs routes really well. So he's another later round prospect I think people should watch out for. But yeah, it's a guy we haven't mentioned yet who I'm very confident turns into an NFL starter for multiple years. It's definitely A.J. Brown.
Is Stanley Morgan Jr., is he the junior of former Patriots Stanley Morgan?
I actually have no idea. That is a good question.
Well, Maines, you're the elder statesman here.
I don't know either, to be honest.
Huh.
let me find out.
I'll get my research department on it.
That's good. We'll find some social media interns.
I'm sure Liz will laugh when we tell her that you've called her your research department, Matt.
Oh, please do not tell her that I said that.
Obviously, Mike, mentioning Liz. Obviously, we've had Liz on the show a number of times. She's a big favourite of ours. Obviously, so we've heard you with her on the Yahoo podcast. Obviously, one of the first times we heard you, you're on the Football Guys podcast with Sigmund and Matt Waldman and the likes. It would be remiss of us to get you here because we didn't speak to you last year. If we didn't speak here about the breaking of the fantasy stronghold, I'm just if you could just tell us what it was like working on a day-to-day basis with Messrs. Co, Grant, Gellar, franchise and Rank, because we asked Rank the other week what it was like working, and he very, very earnestly said that he never cared for any of you.
I don't know. Is Rank out of Twitter jail after trying to dunk on Matt Flynn? I don't know. Has he recovered from that?
I don't think so. I think that's a week into it to jail for that. I got absolutely owned by Matt Flynn there.
Amazing. Yeah, I feel bad for Rank because I understand Rank's humor. So I see when he replies to a guy like Matt Flynn, oh, I didn't mean that in a bad way. Well, of course he means it in a bad way. There's no other way to take it. Unfortunately, everybody else, doesn't know Rank, doesn't read his humor as well as I do after working with him for so many years. I can see that a little bit better. But I mean, there's no other way to put it than it was awesome. I mean, working with Marcus, with Alex, with franchise, with Co, with Adam Rank. I mean, it was amazing, man. I mean, I miss it all the time. Those of us on that podcast, we were like 5 best friends that were getting paid to talk about fantasy football, working for the NFL. If there was any justice in this world, we would have all died there. Like that would have been it. But that's not how it works. That's not how it works in any industry, but it's certainly not how it works in sports media. So I'm happy for all of us that we've all, Marcus and Rank are still there, crushing it, doing great work, fighting the good fight. Everybody else has gone on to find whatever it was that they're looking for, at a new gig, something like that. And it won't be our last stops. There's many more adventures to come for the Fantasy Stronghold. And I'm happy that we've all remained friends. I mean, it was some of the best years of my life. I don't think I will ever I'm pretty confident saying I will never work at a place like that again, where I really feel like every day I'm in the trenches with my absolute best friends doing a job like that. I miss it. There's no doubt about it. I'm happy where I am today, but that was an awesome time.
Lovely stuff, Matt. Final question from us. I guess our question is, how was your first off season as a lifelong San Francisco 49ers fan?
Well, my 49ers, it's been really fun being a lifelong fan for a few weeks. Look, I'm excited. This is a team that I am excited about too. I mean, I will say when I decided to do, when it came as a group decision to do the fantasy as a series where I was going to hunt down the team that I would be a lifelong fan of in 2019 Bachelor style, whereas nobody else, this is how lucky I am as a person, guys. Like, I had a dumb joke on Twitter that the company I work for turned into a 5-part documentary series. I mean, that's ridiculous. I love.
That's a good job.
Twitter and get and get hauled across the coals for it. So.
That is an excellent job.
I love this place. I love my employer. There is no doubt about it. So when I decided to do that, there was one guy, Trevor Lewis, who works on our social media team here, who also worked at NFL Network. So he's familiar. He knows me pretty well. He said right away, "Oh, you're going to pick the 49ers." like from the jump. I was like, what do you mean? Why do you think that? And he's like, oh, they're the perfect Harmon team because they're not that popular. They're not like the Browns. They're not the Browns or something like that where everybody is going to be picking them. They're a contrarian pick. And also, you like it. You like Jimmy G. You like a lot of the players on their team. You like Kyle Shanahan. There's just so much about him that is a perfect Harmon team. And sure enough, at the end of the line, they were there. And I really do think that they could be interesting this year, especially if they add a talent like Nick Bosa at the top of the draft. Then you're looking at a front seven that's vastly different than it was last year, despite the fact that they've sunk a lot of draft capital in there. Now you're going to get a proven pass rusher like D Ford, a potential difference maker like a Nick Bosa. Your front seven's looking very good. And oh, by the way, they get a quarterback who showed flashes of true dominance in terms of elevating the players around him when last we saw him in the 2017 season start more than 3 games for the 49ers, and there's a lot of interesting talents on the offense. So, yeah, this is a team I'm actually really excited about. And yesterday I was sporting a 49ers sweatshirt around the office. There's a 49ers helmet on my desk here at Yahoo Sports. So I'm all in, baby. I'm a lifelong 49ers fan. It feels good.
Well, Matt, as always, brilliant to speak to you. Enjoy Nashville. Enjoy the music, enjoy the food, and most of all, enjoy the NFL draft. And we will speak to you soon.
Thanks so much, guys. Number 1 job, enjoy the draft. Number 2 job, keep Liz Loza out of prison.
One of those sounds a bit easier than the other. A lot
easier than the other one. And that, Neil, was the brilliant Matt Harmon. A pleasure as always, and I'm sure he'll be sending you a quinoa recipe through Twitter very soon.
See, quinoa is one of those that it looks like. Put it this way, it's not quinoa, it's quinoa.
It is quinoa, but yeah, it was created by hipsters for hipsters, so therefore it's quinoa.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to go really hipster, why not call it, really something that has no bearing on how it's actually spelled. Serious question. What actually is it?
It's wheat. Like instead of having like rice or something, it's like a wheat version of it. I think I have eaten it. I have had it. Like
sounds great.
Yeah, it's not for me. Like, but yeah.
Is it people who eat kale? Are they big on quinoa as well?
Quinoa has kale extracts in it. There's no doubt about that. Like, absolutely.
I just no. I mean, I refuse to eat a food anyway that's named after 2 lads who we know are boring, and so kale just sounds even more boring as a food.
True, Neil. True. Neil, that's the end of the show. Coming up to an hour. So where can people catch you this week?
This week, I mentioned it's quite a big time move of mine mentioning an article I've written when we're talking to someone who writes for Yahoo. But I have had an article for Number Fire on why you shouldn't reach for OJ Howard in fantasy drafts this year. And that's pretty much it. I had something the back end of last week that you can still read about why Jalen Richard of the Raiders is an interesting late round running back to target. I dare say I'll be doing some writing up to probably after the draft, but I'm not going to do too much between now and the draft. I will actually just let it happen. This is actually one of the first drafts. We are recording next week, I presume.
Yeah.
It's one of the. I'm not staying up for the draft this year because it doesn't actually start till 2 a.m. So the midnight start I can live with. 2 a.m. I'll wait till the morning. Thanks.
I love the way Neil just didn't highlight the fact that he also writes for Yahoo. Not as regularly as Matt, but you know, I'll do that.
You big time me on that one,
I'll big time you on that one. As we've mentioned before, Neil is at Endutton13. I am at Mainsy7. Together we are at Waxing_Lyrical. And you know what, Neil? That's the end of the show, and these top guys are out.